Welcome to our ultimate Halloween scary story collection 2. We have put together 20 tales to haunt your nights and rattle your nerves. The morgues whisper, the cemeteries stir, and the houses breathe when no one's inside. Every shadow has a story, and tonight they've come to find you. So settle in, let the storm rattle the windows and the fire burn low. The night is long, and it belongs to the dark. Welcome to Whispers After Dark. If you love scary stories as much as we do, comment yes below. We're aiming for 1,000 voices to keep the channel alive. And before the shadows fade, take a moment to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, so the next tale always finds you. There are objects that outlive the holidays they once ended. Keepsakes that soak up every laugh, every tear, every shadow cast by flickering lights. Some of them remember more than they should, and a few never learn the difference between pretending and becoming. One listener begged me to share what happened the day curiosity slipped over his face like a second skin. This isn't a confession so much as a last-ditch warning. This is the Halloween Masks. My name's Martin Keene, and I run an antique holiday shop called Curio and Cheer. Valentine cards from the 1890s, ceramic turkeys, glass-eyed Christmas angels. You name the season, I've probably got a relic of it humming with someone else's nostalgia. Late last winter, right before closing time, a woman glided in, a coat of yellowed mink swinging around her ankles, a tilted hat pinned with what looked like a real blackbird wing. Her perfume smelled like cloves left in a crypt. She spoke only once. I'm selling off the past. 2 trunks. Take them unseen, cash only. We didn't haggle over the price. She sold them cheap, and I handed over the money. Then she pressed a tarnished address tag into my hand and drifted back into the snow. I drove out the next morning. The house matched her perfume. Beautiful once, but hollowed out. Windows boarded, shingles shedding like dead leaves. On the sagging porch sat 2 travel-scarred trunks, brass clasps already unlatched. No sign of the woman. Just a note shoved under one handle. Paid in full. Never open alone. I should have walked away. Instead, I loaded the trunks and didn't touch them again until autumn crept up and inventory ran thin. September gave way to October. Tourists wanted spooky. I cracked open the first trunk and found a gold mine of vintage Christmas bulbs, turkey salt shakers, Thanksgiving greeting cards, exactly the harmless kitsch my shop lived on. The second trunk was different. Inside lay a jumble of masks, leather, bone, porcelain, burlap, each wrapped in tissue gone brittle as old skin. Most were vintage kids' masks from the 1970s, but there were 4 that stood out. The first was a hand-carved coarse wolf's snout with glass fangs and amber eyes that seemed to glow from within. It was beautiful in a creepy Halloween vibe sort of way. Then there was a hand-painted papier-mâché mask, a lacquered jester grinning too wide. Wrapped in a piece of old batik cloth was a tribal wooden face carved with spiral eyes. But the creepiest was at the bottom, half hidden, a warped thing stitched from what looked like funeral shrouds, mouth sewn shut in a jagged row of X's. I told myself I'd catalog them later, but the wolf mask kept staring. The next night was slow. Tuesdays normally are, so after the last customer left, I strapped it on. I blinked, and the next thing I remember, light was leaking through the front windows. My shirt smelled of pine sap and wet earth. 3 days missing, according to the wall calendar. The local news played on the shop radio. A family walking their dog in Sycamore Park had been mauled by a large, unidentified animal. Deep claw marks on trees. Tracks that couldn't be matched to any known species. I locked the mask in the office safe, swore off touching the trunks, and swept the shop twice daily like penance. It didn't matter. The masks whispered. Or maybe it was just the wind whining through loose panes, learning to shape words. Either way, I listened. 1 week later, I tried the jester. Laughter, thin, metallic, and echoing, was the last thing I heard before blackness folded over me. I came to on my storeroom floor, cheeks crusted with dried paint and red and blue diamonds. The radio screamed about a midnight break-in at the psychiatric ward downtown. Nurses found balloons twisted into nooses and a message written in grease paint. Try on a smile. I smashed the jester mask to shards and buried them behind the dumpster. Still, the compulsion returned, sharper each time, settling behind my eyes like a second set of lids. Halloween approached. Shoppers hunted costumes. I barely held it together behind the register. The final mask, the stitched one, seemed to breathe when I lifted the lid. Its fabric pulsed like something beating beneath it. I promised myself I would burn it at closing. But at 11:58 p.m. October 30th, the streetlights outside flickered off. The shop went black except for a single bulb above the counter, buzzing like a trapped wasp. My hands were already untying the mask's cords before I felt them move. It slid over my face like warm clay. Threads cinched at the back of my skull, dug into skin. Dark, syrupy silence swallowed me. I don't know how much time passed. An hour, a week. I woke on the storeroom floor, mask gone, mouth full of dust. The news spilling from a flickering TV spoke of 11 people vanished overnight. Trick-or-treaters, late shift workers, a cop directing traffic, all from streets radiating outward from my shop. Witnesses described a tall figure, wrapped in funeral gauze, eyes like slits of dying fire. Everywhere it went, the power died. I searched the store. The trunks were empty. Every mask gone. The front door was still bolted from the inside, yet muddy footprints led outside and vanished at the curb. I think the masks found new owners. I'm writing this with boards nailed over my windows and every mirror turned toward the wall. I can still feel the thread marks on my neck, itching like they're ready to cinch tight again. And sometimes, when the street goes quiet, I swear I hear muffled laughter, wolf howls smothered under burlap, jester giggles drowned in cloth. So listen carefully. If an old woman offers you a trunk of holiday curiosities, walk away. If you spot a mask that seems to breathe before you touch it, leave it in the dark. And if, God forbid, you wake up on November 1st with days missing and dust in your teeth, check the news. Because someone, maybe you, just wore Halloween longer than one night, and the masks are still swapping faces out there. Keep your own face safe, and whatever you do, never try on the last mask. There are houses the night tries to forget, places where the walls still breathe, where footsteps echo long after the floorboards rot. Some doors don't open for you, they open because of you. Have you ever felt drawn to a place like that? One of my listeners was. He sent me his story with a single request. Tell it exactly as I lived it. So I will. Believe it or don't. But once you hear it, you won't forget it. This is The Haunting at Rook Mansion. My name's Jake. I wasn't even sure I wanted to share this. I figured no one would believe me anyway. But at this point, I don't really care if you do or not. This happened. And I wish to God it hadn't, because if I'm being honest, I never should have stepped foot inside Rook Mansion. I never planned to spend a single hour, much less an entire storm-soaked night in Rook Mansion. I only wanted a few photographs for my urban exploration blog. One shot of the infamous staircase that, according to rumor, reached a landing and simply vanished. Old-timers said the house belonged to a recluse named Silas Rook, a man who lived alone so long the halls forgot how to sound like anyone else's footsteps. The gravel drive dissolved into mud the moment thunder rolled over the pines, stranding my car at the gate. With nowhere dry to wait, I crossed the sagging porch and found the door already ajar, as if the house had been expecting company. My flashlight beam quivered across water-warped wallpaper, and the scent of wet plaster mingled with something older, like books left to rot in a tomb. Inside, the air felt crowded, even though I was alone. Each board I stepped on sighed inward, then rose behind me as if inhaling my presence. I tried to laugh it off, but that laugh died the first time I caught movement in a gilt-framed mirror, a pale face hovering behind my shoulder. I spun around, nothing there. When I looked back, my reflection stood by itself, alone and shaking, a stranger gone. I wiped a sleeve across the glass. A cold palm print lingered where no hand should have reached. Farther in, doors I'd closed moments earlier drifted slowly open. Portraits lined the corridor, somber Victorians in funereal black. But each time my light passed over them, their eyes followed. By the time I reached the notorious staircase, rain hammered the roof like desperate hands. The steps rose 10 feet, ended at blank wall, then resumed higher up, swallowed by gloom. I raised my camera for the shot and almost dropped it. Every preview image showed a woman in a widow's gown standing halfway up the impossible stairs, black veil rippling though the air below was perfectly still. She never appeared to my naked eye, only in the lens, hovering, patient. On the screen she beckoned, a finger curling just for me. A metallic thunk echoed behind me. The front door, my exit, had swung shut. When I hurried back, the knob crumbled in my hand like rotted wood, the brass flaking away as if it aged a century in seconds. Lightning flashed through cracked panes, and in that strobing light I saw her again, reflected in every window at once. The widow of Rook Mansion, inches away, veil brushing my cheek where nothing touched my skin. I stumbled room to room, hunted by drafts that smelled of cemetery earth. The chandeliers swayed though the air was stone still. In the dining hall, a place setting had appeared for one, dust-free, silverware perfectly aligned. The chair pulled back in mute invitation. My pulse drummed loud enough to drown the thunder. I found a study lined with warped books and hid there, hoping the storm would ease. Shadows pooled thick in the corners, and as minutes crawled by, I realized the house was breathing through me. Each inhale a tightening around my ribs, each exhale a whispered word I couldn't quite parse. Then the mirror above the desk bloomed with frost. On its fog-silvered surface, the widow's face pressed outward, veil plastered to unseen features, lips mouthing two words, stay, forever. The lights died. Something cold skimmed my spine. Reflex lifted my camera and the flash burst white. In that single blink, I saw her fully, one skeletal hand buried wrist-deep in my chest, fingers curled around a heart I couldn't feel beating. The shutter closed. The room went black again. When I dared reopen my eyes, I was alone, sagging against the doorframe, breath ragged, chest aching like a phantom bruise. How I reached the porch, I still don't know. Dawn bled into the sky while the storm staggered east. I found myself kneeling in the drive, clothes soaked, camera gone. My phone was somehow untouched, only one image in the cloud, timestamped 3:04 a.m. Me on the staircase, mouth open in a silent scream, the widow's hand sliding from my chest as though she were pulling my heart back into her house. That morning I told myself I'd survived Rook Mansion. But when I close my eyes at night, I'm still inside, wandering endless halls that rearrange behind me, climbing a staircase that ends at darkness, until her veil brushes my cheek, and I feel that cold hand curling through my ribs once more. The mansion hasn't let me go. It has merely loaned me to daylight. So if you ever see Rook Mansion brooding at the end of its weed-choked lane, keep driving. Some houses aren't meant to be explored, and some doors, once they close behind you, never truly open again. There are nights when the wind carries faint carnival music no living band should be playing. Nights when rust-stained rides creak in the dark and painted smiles peel back to bare, grinny bones. Some midway lights never really go out. They just wait for someone foolish enough to notice. Would you ever walk into an abandoned carnival if the lights suddenly came on at midnight? Most of us would turn the other way. But one of my listeners didn't. He said he didn't even know why he went, only that something about the lights felt personal. He asked me to tell his story, not for sympathy, and not even for belief, just so someone would know what really happened. This is Painted Smiles. My name's Kevin. I went back and forth about telling this. Honestly, I figured most people would just roll their eyes or think I made it all up. But I've been living with this too long to care what anyone thinks anymore. Maybe if I showed you my face, you'd believe me. It happened, and I wish more than anything I'd kept driving that night instead of stepping through the gate at the Route 16 fairground. Everyone in town knew the place was cursed. The stories changed over time. Some said the Ferris wheel collapsed in the 70s and took a family with it. Others swore the carnival packed up in the middle of the night after a little girl went missing in the funhouse and was never found. But all of them ended the same. The fairground closed and it never reopened. Not officially, anyway. That night, I was driving home from covering a softball game 2 counties over for the local newspaper. Nothing but pine and dark stretched for miles. It was late, close to midnight, October 30th. I was passing the old turnoff when I saw them. Lights, faint at first, then flickering stronger. Midway lights, red and gold and flickering like a pulse through the fog. The gate was still padlocked, but not hard. The chain looked like it had been twisted open and reclosed 1,000 times. My press badge was still around my neck. I guess I told myself I was just chasing a story. The second I stepped onto the midway, I heard it. That old shrieking calliope sound, slightly off-key. It played slowly, dragging every note like it was being pulled out of something's throat. The whole place stank of mildew, wet wood, and stale popcorn. The air felt used, like 1,000 breaths had passed through it already. I glanced at my phone. It was just after midnight. Halloween. I actually chuckled, thinking maybe I'd snap a few eerie shots and run a Halloween feature for the paper. Ghosts of the Route 16 fairground, or something dumb like that. It felt oddly fitting at the time. Not so much. The first thing I noticed were the clowns. Not people, mannequins. Dozens of them, slumped against the game stalls and hot dog stands, limbs cocked at unnatural angles. Some had wigs. Some were bald. All of them had faces that were too detailed, like someone had tried to sculpt emotion into plastic, but stopped right before getting it human. Their eyes gleamed like wet glass, and when I turned to check one behind me, I swear it had shifted a few inches closer. At the far end of the midway was a large striped tent, mirror maze, faded sign said. No lights powered it. And yet the interior glowed red, like some kind of heartbeat was throbbing through the mirrors. They say curiosity killed the cat, but I went in anyway. Have you ever been in one of those places where you can feel something watching from all sides? The mirrors didn't just show me, they mocked me. Every reflection grinned wider than my real face. At first I thought it was distortion, but the longer I stayed, the more I noticed the difference. My reflection wasn't copying me anymore. It was acting on its own. I moved left. It stayed still. I blinked. It didn't. Then, it waved. At the center of the maze stood a figure, a clown, but not a funny one. Grease paint over skin so pale it looked dead. It was dressed like me, but its smile was impossibly wide, reaching almost to its ears. It held out a hand and gave me a faded, cracked ticket. It was cold, felt almost like ice. The words burned into it. Admit one, forever. When I looked up, the clown was gone. So was the exit. The mirrors had sealed into solid red glass, no seams, no doors. Just my own image in every direction, and behind me in every reflection, the clown's face, hovering an inch from my shoulder. I don't remember how I got out, not clearly. Something pulled me through. A sound, maybe, a voice. I remember running, but I don't remember moving. The next clear memory I have is standing on the shoulder of Route 16 at dawn, covered in white grease paint, shaking, my lips cracked from smiling too hard. That smile hasn't left me since. I've tried to scrub it off. Makeup removers, alcohol, bleach, even industrial solvents. Nothing works. Doctors say my facial muscles are locking into a condition they've never seen before. I'm always grinning. My cheeks hurt, my teeth ache. And every night, just before I fall asleep, I hear the calliope again, somewhere far off but getting closer. There's something worse too. A week after it happened, I found that ticket again. I don't know how, it was in my back pocket, even though I threw it away. And now, whenever I turn off the lights, I swear I can see a faint red glow behind the bathroom mirror, like someone waiting, smiling, beckoning. So take this for what it's worth. Believe me, don't believe me. But if you're ever out near Route 16 and you see carnival lights flicker on where no carnival should be, don't stop, don't slow down, and whatever you do, don't smile back. There are places where the earth never truly settles, where roots and bones tangle so deep they share the same slow heartbeat. People call them cemeteries. I call them warning signs the living keep ignoring. One listener sent me proof. She didn't ask for anything, and she certainly didn't want fame. She just needed someone to hear her before the ground covers the rest of her story. I'll just call her story, The Gravekeeper, and let you choose what you believe. My name's Clara, and I come from 4 generations of funeral directors. I was embalming with my parents before I learned long division, reading gravestones and making up stories about the people there like other kids read comic books. I enjoyed exploring the older part of the cemetery, and most days were spent wandering amongst the old moss-covered headstones. I even enjoyed bringing a book to read to the long dead while I ate my lunch under this huge old oak tree. Its limbs almost touched the ground in some places. It was beautiful with its drippy moss. I didn't have friends, at least living ones. Most people thought I was odd for spending so much time in the graveyard. When my uncle Jeremiah, the last caretaker of Maple Hill Cemetery, died, the town council handed me his ring of iron keys, figuring I'd feel right at home. I thought the job would be peaceful. Cemeteries usually are. The dead rarely complain. Maple Hill had other ideas. From my first week after accepting the job, the headstones wouldn't stay put. I just couldn't figure out what was going on. I had never seen the graves do this. I'd align them at dusk. By dawn, they leaned like drunks after last call. Fresh sod heaved upward in narrow ridges, as though something underneath kept stretching. I blamed frost, groundwater, shifting clay, anything but the stories my uncle used to mumble after too much whiskey. Graves grow when nobody's watching. The trouble centered on a grave close to the old tree, plot 219. Baby Eleanor, born 1886, died 1888. Her marker carried a stone lamb so weather-worn its face looked boiled smooth. One storm-thick evening, lightning forked across the sky, and I noticed the soil over Eleanor's grave was newly churned, rich, black, and damp as fresh coffee grounds. Before I could grab a shovel, I spotted it, a tiny handprint pressed up from beneath the mud. Fingers the size of bird bones, my chest knotted. I whispered that it must be water pressure. But when I turned away, the marble lamb bleated behind me, just one fragile, broken note. That night I dreamed of roots tugging at my ankles like pleading hands. When I woke, the sheets smelled of wet soil. Every evening after, plot 219 rose a little higher. The mound pushed skyward, ribs of pale root curling out like sapwood fingers begging to break free. I hammered stakes around the perimeter to keep visitors away. By Halloween, the grave stood knee-high, an earthen blister ready to burst. I decided to dig. If rot or gas or groundwater was to blame, I needed proof. Rain drummed the tarp of my hood as I jabbed my spade into the mound. 6 inches down, the dirt changed texture, loose, almost spongy. I scooped again. Something pale turned in the mud. Roots, but not roots. They were bleached smooth like ivory, branched in the shape of ribs. When my shovel struck them, the sound was sharp, like bone tapping stone. I scraped away more soil and uncovered a child-sized rib cage, delicate and deliberate, woven entirely from living wood. The ribs flexed toward me. I stumbled back, boots slipping. The ground split open along a jagged seam. Gray, fibrous tendrils, half plant, half vein, unfurled like knuckled fingers and wrapped around my calves. The rib cage rose from the earth, sap white and pulsing, crowned by a skull carved in the likeness of the stone lamb. It leaned close, roots creaking like old floorboards, and a childlike giggle sighed through its hollow chest. I screamed. No one answered. Vines slithered across the path, lashing the cemetery gates shut. Maple trees groaned, bark splitting as new sapling ribs sprouted from their trunks. Every grave around me swelled, mounds breathing in unison, hungry for air. I wrenched free and sprinted toward the caretaker's cottage. Inside, Uncle Jeremiah's journals lay scattered across the desk. Page after page described graves that flowered if tended to kindly, if whispered to, if touched with sympathy. He'd written one last warning in a shaking hand. The cemetery keeps what loves it. I understood then. Maple Hill hadn't chosen me by accident. It had been groomed by my family for generations, each caretaker feeding the roots with care and names and grief until the ground itself learned to grow the dead anew. I locked the cottage door, but vines crawled through the keyhole, thickening into fists that rattled the knob. Somewhere outside, that bleeding skull giggled like a wind-struck chime. If you're reading this, then the story reached you, and I'm already part of the soil, whether I'm buried in it yet or not. Maple Hill doesn't let its caretakers leave. I know now that if I ever stop tending the graves, they'll come for me. I feel them watching, waiting, growing restless if I'm late with even one offering of care. I read to them every day now from the bench beneath the old twisted tree at the center of the grounds. Sometimes I swear I see the gravestones shift, inching closer, like they're crawling just to hear me better. The pages shake in my hands, but I keep reading because if I stop, I don't know what will rise from the dirt to take my place. So I stay. I keep the paths clear. I whisper names. I make the dead feel seen. Because if I don't, they'll make me one of them. Maple Hill is still expanding, and it's always, always hungry for new hands. There are Halloweens when the dead edge closer to the roadside, when a cemetery's rust-flaked gates open just wide enough for something lost to wander out. On nights like these, a pale figure might step into your headlights, thumb trembling in the wind, and you'll think you're doing a kindness by slowing down. A listener sent me the tale that follows. I'm not sure I believe every detail, but I'll pass it on exactly as he wrote it. Decide for yourself. This is The Girl in the White Dress. My name's Daniel. My wife Sarah and I were driving home from a Halloween potluck at our church last October, October 28th, 11:43 p.m. to be exact, when we first saw her. She was standing just outside Green Meadow Cemetery, shivering beneath a copper street lamp. The light made her look almost sepia, like an old photograph brought to life. Her dress was white, but not the kind anyone wears anymore. High collar, puffed sleeves, fabric yellowing at the seams, the hem stained gray as if she'd walked through miles of dust. Chestnut hair clung damp against her face, and her eyes, so startlingly ice blue they seemed to glow, were red from crying, though no tears fell. And on her feet, only one shoe. An old blue tennis shoe, scuffed at the toe, laces trailing like she'd been running until the earth swallowed the other. Sarah's hand shot out, squeezing my arm. Daniel, stop. Before I could talk myself out of it, I slowed. The girl didn't wave or motion. She just stood there with her pale blue cardigan folded tight to her chest, trembling like she'd been waiting all night for someone to see her. There was a moment of hesitation, and then she opened the door. When she slid into the back seat, the temperature dropped, and a smell drifted in with her. Damp autumn leaves crushed underfoot, mixed with the faint sweetness of lilac perfume, the kind you only find in bottles hidden at the back of old dressers. She whispered an address on Juniper Lane. Her voice was fragile, barely audible, and after that she said nothing, just stared out the window, shoulders rising now and then, with a soundless sob. I tried the radio for background noise, but every station fuzzed with static until I turned it off. For 10 minutes, the car held nothing but the rhythm of the tires on asphalt and the quiet, hitching breaths of our passenger. When I eased to a stop outside the house on Juniper Lane, Sarah turned to tell her we'd arrived. The back seat was empty, the door still locked, no indentation in the upholstery, not even the sound of fabric brushing past us as she vanished. We sat frozen, my wife whispering a prayer under her breath. Then Sarah noticed a single damp leaf pressed against the seat, veins dark as if it had been plucked straight from a grave. 2 nights later, October 30th, 11:50 p.m., we passed Green Meadow again, and there she was, same pale figure beneath the street lamp, same white dress, same solitary shoe. Logic told me to keep driving. Curiosity, or maybe guilt, pressed my foot to the brake. She climbed in once more, gave the same address, wept the same soundless sobs. This time she disappeared sooner at the final turn before Juniper Lane. Sarah swore the temperature plunged, so sharp her breath frosted the glass. By Halloween night, the cemetery was wrapped in fog so thick the headstones looked like hunched shadows straining against the dark. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both felt it. That tug in our chests like something unfinished was waiting for us there. The road itself seemed to breathe, drawing us back. We passed Green Meadow once just before 11, headlights cutting through the mist. Nothing. Just iron gates sweating rust and the occasional scrape of wind through dead branches. Sarah kept craning her neck toward the lamppost, whispering that she thought she saw movement. I pressed the accelerator, but my stomach clenched like I'd left something undone. The second time we circled back, closer to midnight, the fog had thickened into a wall. We drove slow, windows cracked as if we might hear her before we saw her. Still nothing. Just silence too heavy to be ordinary. Sarah gripped my hand and said, "She's out there. I know she is." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. The air felt charged, like the pause before lightning finds the ground. We thought about heading home, but the road kept pulling us back toward the gates. Once more we made the drive to the cemetery. At 12:07 a.m., there she was, nearer the gate this time. The lamplight showed pale around her. Her white dress hung heavy, mud clinging to its hem, but the blue shoe still clung stubbornly to one pale foot. I don't know why we stopped again, maybe because deep down we knew this was the night she'd been waiting for. She spoke only once on that final ride. Her lips parted, voice hoarse but steady. "Home, please. I'm so tired." When we pulled into the driveway on Juniper Lane, she lingered in the seat, trembling, eyes locked on the house as if she feared crossing the threshold. Sarah stepped out, circled to the rear door, and opened it wide. Moonlight spilled into the back seat. The girl was gone, but the air filled with the thick perfume of lilacs. On the floorboard lay the girl's blue tennis shoe. We carried it to the porch. The light flicked on, revealing a stooped woman in a threadbare robe. She opened the door just enough for her tired eyes to fall on the shoe in Sarah's hands. And in that instant, her whole body seemed to buckle, grief giving way to something like relief. "Did you pick her up at the graveyard?" she rasped. We nodded. 3 times, I told her. "But she made it all the way home tonight." The woman smiled, a sad, trembling smile, and reached for a locket at her throat and passed it to my wife. Inside was the same girl, smiling, alive, happy. That was my daughter, Cynthia. She was taken, vanished, 31 Halloweens ago. All we found the night she vanished was her shoe. She said. Sarah handed her back the locket. Her voice cracked as she wiped her face. Her body was found in Green Meadow 4 months later. She cradled the dusty sneaker like it was made of glass and said in a shaky voice, "It's taken 31 years, but she made it home tonight. Thank you. Thank you for stopping." She closed the door before we could reply. Through the etched glass, we saw her sink to her knees, shoulders shaking as she clutched the shoe to her chest. And as we backed out of the driveway, Sarah gasped and pointed. In the second-story window stood the girl in the white dress, her ice-blue eyes shining. She smiled, raised a hand, and waved goodbye. I haven't driven that road since. So if you ever see a lone girl in a white dress standing outside a cemetery on Halloween, don't dismiss her. I'm not saying you should stop, but sometimes the kindest thing you can do is give a ghost a ride home, because maybe all she needs is someone to help her find her way back. There are midnights when the highway bends in ways it shouldn't, where signs appear that weren't there an hour ago, and lights flicker in places that should be dead dark. Some carnivals only exist one night a year, and the price of entry is never what you think. One listener made the mistake of stopping at one of them. He told me what happened before the strings went taut and the lights burned out. This is the Midnight Carnival. My name's Caleb Foster, and I hadn't been to a carnival since I was 12. But on Halloween a few years back, just past 11:30 p.m., I was cruising home on a lonely stretch of highway when I saw it. A string of neon arrows flickering in the mist off the shoulder at mile marker 147. They pulsed one after the other like they were waiting for me. A wooden sign had been propped beside the exit, hand-painted and half-rotting, Murter Marvel's Carnival, one night only. I figured why not. I was tired, wired on gas station coffee, and craving anything that felt remotely human after 13 hours alone with country static. The access road twisted off the map and ended in a gravel lot I swear wasn't there during daylight. But the carnival was. Rusted rides creaked in the wind. Rows of crooked game booths leaned under rotting canvas. Strands of flickering bulbs buzzed overhead like swarming fireflies. It smelled like burnt sugar, motor oil, and something else. Something older. Still, I walked in, paid my $5 to a dead-eyed teen in a band jacket, and tried to enjoy myself. Bought a funnel cake the size of a hubcap. Chased it with cotton candy that melted like spider webs in my mouth. I wandered down the midway, laughing to myself when I missed 3 straight throws at the bottle toss. The prizes were weird. Porcelain dolls with stitched mouths, taxidermy bats in mason jars, masks that looked suspiciously human, but I chalked it up to carnival kitsch. I bought a hot dog too, the works, and washed it down with a Coke. The crowd was thin, almost spectral. Everyone wore costumes, but no one talked. I asked a tall guy in a plague doctor mask where the corn dogs were. He just pointed to booth next to Funhouse, then turned and walked away without a word. Still, the place had a kind of gravity, like it remembered every kid who ever stepped onto a midway with greasy fingers and wide eyes. That's when I saw the velvet tent at the edge of the grounds just past the corn dog hut in the Funhouse. It didn't look like much from the outside. Wilted maroon fabric, gold fringe, decaying into dust. But the sign nailed to the entrance was new. Sharp black paint and curling script read, "The Marionette, free show at midnight." A small wooden stage waited inside, surrounded by silence. Lanterns swayed overhead, burning low and orange. At the center of the stage hung a single marionette, wooden, jointed, almost life-sized, suspended by crimson threads that vanished into the shadows above. Its limbs dangled limp, head cocked to the side like it was listening. I started to leave. That's when the barker stepped out from behind the curtain. He wore a crushed top hat, a long-tailed purple velvet coat with tattered ruffles at the cuffs and gloves too small for his hands. His smile looked carved. "Go on," he said, voice like a rusted gate. "Make him dance. First pull is free." He handed me the wooden control bar, cool to the touch, worn smooth by who knows how many hands. I hesitated, then pulled the left string. My shoulder jerked upward with a snap, not the puppet's, mine. Pain flared. I dropped the bar, or tried to. My hands wouldn't let go. The wood had splintered at the edges, thin crimson fibers coiling around my fingers, burrowing into the skin like thread into cloth. I screamed. The puppet remained still until its head slowly lifted, eyes meeting mine. Eyes that looked just like mine. The barker tipped his hat. "Every show needs a star," he whispered, then laughed. It pierced the darkened tent like nails on a chalkboard. I felt something pull upward. My feet scraped the dirt. My spine arched unnaturally. The threads, no longer fibers, but living red tendrils, tightened around my wrists, ankles, neck. They sank deeper, threading into my veins. My heartbeat slowed, and then synced to something else. Below me, the puppet straightened, flesh-colored now, breathing, smiling. It reached up, unhooked itself, and dropped from the stage with my walk, my gait, my eyes. The lanterns dimmed. The barker clapped once, and the puppet in my skin bowed to the empty tent, then strode out into the Halloween night, into my life, twirling my truck keys on his finger. I tried to scream, couldn't. My jaw hung slack. Above me, dim outlines moved in the gloom. Dozens, maybe hundreds of shapes, dangling, swaying slightly. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. I was up there, in that velvet dark. The lights flicker on once a year, and a new sign goes up on the tent. The name changes. Sometimes it's the puppet's choice. Sometimes the strings of fate. But the tent always opens. The barker always waits. And the puppet always gets to leave. Last Halloween, it was finally my turn. But I didn't walk out in my own skin. I left in someone else's body, with someone else's family, and now I live each day knowing I'm living someone else's life. I wake up beside a woman who's supposed to be my wife. I have 2 children I don't recognize. They look at me like I've changed, and they're right. I have. So if you're ever driving on Halloween night and see a crooked arrow pointing toward a carnival that shouldn't be there, keep driving. No matter how loud the music plays, no matter how sweet the air smells. Because once you take hold of the strings, they pull back. There are Halloweens when the moon doesn't just rise, it watches. Nights when the air goes still, the fog holds its breath, and the shadows in the tree line feel older than the trees themselves. One listener sent me his story from a stretch of backcountry near Ash Creek. He didn't ask me to tell it for fame, just to leave a warning. One listener sent me his story from a stretch of backcountry near Ash Creek. He said he's done trying to justify what he's become. He just can't carry the guilt alone anymore. According to him, it's not something he chose, but it is something he can't stop. I'm not sure if I believe him, but I'll tell it exactly the way he wrote it. You can decide for yourself. This is Werewolf Moon. My name's Logan. I'm a firefighter with Station 33. I've seen wildfires lick the sky and accident scenes that haunt me long after the sirens fade, but nothing like what happened last Halloween. It started with a call about livestock, possible animal attack, Ash Creek Road, multiple sheep down. Dispatch thought it was a mountain lion, maybe a bear, but when we rolled up on the pasture, what we found looked like a massacre. The sheep weren't killed, they were torn apart. Some were half-eaten, others barely touched. Fencing had been ripped open like foil. One of the guys spotted prints, bare human footprints leading in from the woods. But they didn't leave the way they came. What left that field walked on paws the size of dinner plates. I should have left it to wildlife services, but something about the scene felt wrong, like unfinished business. And truth is, I'd been restless ever since the barn fire 2 weeks earlier, the one where we found the drifter's body, curled up in the ashes like he'd never tried to escape. He was covered in scratch marks, not from fire, from claws. The report said accidental death, but his face haunted me. I looked into it, found out he'd been staying in an old hunting shack up by the creek bend, just past the tree line. So the night after the livestock call, October 31st, I went back up alone. Took a borrowed tranquilizer rifle. Said it was curiosity, but I think part of me already knew. The shack was dark, the air too still, but something inside had moved through recently. Bedding turned, claw marks on the frame, broken chains at the headpost, and in the far corner, an old leather collar and a lockbox with scorched edges. I picked it up, and the metal burned cold. Inside was a scorched journal, and inside were ramblings about being a werewolf. And just for a second, I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. I was 16, out behind a convenience store with friends. A stray dog had come limping out of the woods, thin, quiet, watching. I reached down to feed it part of my sandwich, and it lunged, bit my hand deep. The ER doctor called it just a bad dog bite. Said I was lucky it didn't go for my throat. They gave me shots and sent me home. But for days after, I had fevers, nightmares. I thought I saw yellow eyes in the window. My folks said it was just trauma. Now I wasn't so sure. That's when I smelled it. Musk and metal and something sour behind the nose. The air turned heavy. I stepped outside and looked up just as the clouds broke, moon full and orange as a harvest lantern. That was the moment. I didn't trip, I didn't fall, I changed. Bones collapsed and rebuilt, nerves rewired with fire. My skin tore itself apart and healed in the same breath. My scream pitched into a howl, and somewhere deep down I liked it. The hunt that followed wasn't thought. It was instinct. When I woke, I was naked, mud-caked, and bloody by the creek. The rifle bent into a shape no human could have forced. Something had claimed me, and it wasn't done. The shack was empty when I went back. The collar was gone. But the initials hadn't been a coincidence. Whatever cursed that drifter found its next host. Maybe that fire wasn't an accident. Maybe the drifter let himself burn when he couldn't fight it anymore. I filed my report and left out the part about me. But since that night, every reflective surface shows me what's waiting just beneath the skin. A second set of eyes, yellow predatory just behind mine. Not always visible, but always there. Now it's Halloween again. The moon's already risen. I can feel the pull in my spine, the slow rewiring of my body. I've locked myself in the station tool shed, chains wrapped tight around a steel support beam. I've warned my crew not to call, but I don't know if it'll be enough this time. So if you're anywhere near Ash Creek tonight and you hear something howling, not a coyote, not a dog, stay inside, lock your doors, don't answer strange knocks. And if you see a firefighter badge glinting beneath fur and fangs, run, because the Halloween moon is up and I'm not the one in control anymore. There are houses that sleep all year with their shutters drawn and their walls full of whispers until Halloween. That's when the locks unclick on their own, the lights burn without wires, and the air inside hums with the weight of unfinished business. Some homes don't want to be sold. They want to choose who stays. The story I'm about to tell was sent by a man from Louisiana who swore it was true. He didn't care if anyone believed him, only that the next buyer gets a warning. This is Midnight Showings Only. My name is Alex. I work in real estate, flipping historic properties when the market is right. I thought I'd seen it all: rotted floor joists, collapsing chimneys, homes crawling with mold. Then I was called to the Marrowbone estate. It had been empty for decades. The heirs insisted the closing happen on Halloween night at midnight. Not before, not after. Exactly at midnight. I thought it was odd, but I get strange clients sometimes. The drive up was a tunnel of wet branches scraping the car roof like fingernails. The house stood waiting behind a veil of vines, its windows hollow, its roof hunched like tired shoulders. Rain tapped steadily on the porch railings, and the air smelled faintly of iron, as though something had already bled into the soil. Inside, the foyer breathed damp roses, lemon oil, and something sour beneath it all, like rot polished over and forgotten. Candle bulbs burned in sconces even though the power had been cut for years. Every board groaned as though it remembered footsteps too well. The wallpaper sweated with damp. I moved deeper, and the house seemed to lengthen itself. Halls stretched twice their size, carpets sagged with hidden damp, and portraits along the walls shifted in the corner of my eye. Dust floated sideways, tugged as if by breath. In the library, a ledger lay open on a desk, its pages crawling with names scored out in rust-colored lines. A pen rested on the blotter, still wet, a bead of red trembling at the tip. The sound of voices drifted through the house, flat and thin, like recordings warped by age. They echoed my name, urging me toward the ballroom, though the corridor twisted endlessly until I was dragged back to the library again. The ledger waited, a blank line beneath my name already etched in crimson. Above me, chains rattled. Somewhere deep within the walls, a laugh rose, thin and piercing, like nails dragged across a blackboard. I found coats on the floorboards, still warm, as if their owners had been erased mid-step. I ran for the door, but every hall folded inward, pushing me back toward the desk. The air grew thick. Dust gathered into silhouettes, empty suits, wedding gowns with no bodies, children's play clothes drifting on invisible hooks. The house ticked like a heartbeat. Midnight was near. From the vents, a whisper came, layered, metallic, endless. Sign the contract. My phone glowed only with the date, letters burning blood orange, October 31st. Windows cracked when I struck them, then healed, knitting themselves back together like broken bone. The walls pulsed, plaster contracting as though the house was breathing me in. When the pen touched my hand, it was cold as ice water. My name spread itself across the page. The ink climbed into my veins, threading upward like frost on glass. The house sighed, long and low. The halls shrank back to their proper size. The coats were gone. The front door now stood ajar, rain misting through. Outside, the for sale sign had changed. My photograph smiled back at me. The eyes were too bright. The teeth were too sharp. Beneath it, new letters glowed as if cut from fire. Midnight showing. One night only, I should have fled. Instead, the house pulled me back. I sat at the library desk, the ledger spread before me, the pen waiting in my hand. The air smelled of roses gone rotten. The walls hummed with anticipation. Midnight stretched long, then reset, then began again. And soon, footsteps scraped across the porch. Laughter too thin to last carried through the hall. The front door opened like a mouth ready to feed. The house had chosen new buyers. I couldn't warn them. The house wouldn't let me. If you ever see a mansion advertising midnight showings on Halloween night, don't step inside. Because what's for sale isn't the house, it's you. And the price it pays is everything you'll never get back. Trust me, I know. And when the clock strikes midnight, I'll be waiting. Some places were never meant to be rented. You can paint the walls, scrub the floors, even hide the locked door at the end of the hall, but the past doesn't care. Someone sent me this story and asked me to share it, so here it is, just as they told it to me. This is the story of the locked nursery. We booked the cabin for the last week of October, one rustic, cedar-framed retreat perched above a mirror-black lake, ringed by evergreens that burned gold where the sun hit them. It looked almost new from the driveway, but up close you could smell the age in its timbers, old varnish and smoke from fireplaces. A keypad on the door beeped us in, and the welcome packet lay on the dining table inside. Right at the top was a post-it. Please do not open the nursery door. Private. We laughed it off. Every Airbnb hides a broom closet full of paint cans, but the word nursery landed strange. The first night slipped by in silence. Loons calling on the water, wind cruel to the stovepipe, nothing else. The second night, something new crept in, a hush that felt pressed against our ears. At around 2, I sat up, sure I'd heard floorboards flex in the hallway. When I listened harder, the cabin was dead quiet, as though it had just inhaled and was waiting to exhale. By the third night, the silence began to move. From the kitchen doorway, I caught a shape reflected in the bay window. A woman, pale hair pinned in a soft bun, her back to me while she rinsed something at the sink. I blinked, and my own reflection snapped back into place. I didn't tell Claire. The mountains already had her nervous, and I didn't want to ruin the trip. She told me first. Over coffee the next morning, she said she'd seen an older lady in a gray cardigan hovering near the locked door at the end of the hall, like a grandma making sure nobody wakes the baby. I tried to smile it away, but cold ran the length of my spine because I hadn't said anything about the kitchen figure. October 29th. The lake gave off fog that never burned off, hanging close to the deck railings. That afternoon, the cabin felt crowded, like we'd invited someone in without knowing. Every so often, Claire would stop mid-sentence, tilt her head and whisper, "Do you hear that?" I'd strain, hear nothing, and then, almost inside the walls, the faintest hiccup of a cry. Far away, yet inside the room with us. On the 30th, the crying became a thread twisting through every silence. Soft, breathy, punctuated by a wet baby sob. We turned up music, opened windows, anything. The sound slid under it all. At dusk, Claire swore she saw the gray-haired woman crossing the hallway toward the nursery, something swaddled in her arms. Halloween arrived brutal and bright. A hard wind whipped the lake into steel. By noon, the crying was no longer faint. It rose in short, broken wails so sharp they rattled picture frames. We tried to call the host. The signal died before it rang. At twilight, the house fell abruptly silent, like a lid snapped over a jar. We should have packed then, but curiosity is its own chain. Midnight. The crying erupted again, louder than before, a wounded siren. We'd slept in shifts all week. Now neither of us could sit still. Claire grabbed the fire poker. I took the small hatchet we'd used on kindling. 2 strikes snapped the antique hook latch off the nursery door. Dust billowed as it swung inward. Moonlight poured between sheer curtains, silvering everything. A wooden cradle, a tin mobile of stars, toys gone brittle with years. In the far corner, a high-backed rocker moved in its own tide. Creak, creak. An old woman sat there, cardigan buttoned at the throat, thin lips pursed in a lullaby hum. In her arms, something transparent kicked and fussed. An infant made of smoke and moonlight, mouth open in a voiceless scream. She raised her head, dull blue eyes fixed on us with a terrible softness, the kind polished smooth by grief. "Shh," she whispered, rocking faster. "You'll wake the house. It hasn't finished feeding him." The crying thickened, spilling from the walls, floorboards, even the ceiling beams, layered voices, infant and ancient all at once. The cradle rattled as if something beneath the floor pushed up against it. Every exhale in the room felt stolen, the air pulled from our lungs and drawn into the child's smoky chest. The house itself seemed to breathe, plaster groaning like ribs, shadows flexing in and out with each shudder of the rocker. The woman's lips pinched white. For a moment her lullaby faltered, drowned by the sound of the house filling the infant with its own breath. Then her face twisted sharp, eyes snapping wide as her voice broke into a hiss that cut through the din. "Leave now! Not your turn to feed the baby." The crying doubled, though the child's mouth never uttered a sound. Around us, floorboards groaned as if small feet hurried across them. Toys rattled in the cradle. The temperature plummeted so fast, breath crystallized. Frost crept across the floor and covered the windows. Claire backed into the hallway, pulling me with her. From every room came short gusts of air, like unseen lungs exhaling. I slammed the nursery door, and the air suddenly stilled, then complete silence. We packed in a frenzy, hands shaking, hearts pounding, shoving clothes and toiletries into bags without care. I hauled everything straight through the front door, the hinges screaming as if warning us not to leave. I threw the bags into the trunk, slammed it shut, and slid into the driver's seat. The ignition caught on the second turn, engine roaring like a wounded animal, headlights cutting tunnels through the fog. Gravel sprayed behind us as the tires spun before finally catching. For half a second, instinct forced my eyes to the rearview mirror. The cabin still glowed faintly, its windows pale and watchful. And in the doorway, framed in that sickly light, stood the woman, gray cardigan buttoned to her throat, rocking a bundle in her arms. Her eyes never left mine. The door eased shut, slow as a coffin lid, and the sound of it settling into place was sharp as bones snapping clean. We didn't breathe again until the road bent and the house was gone. We drove until sunrise painted the ridges blood orange, the lake and trees shrinking into memory. Only when the last hairpin curve fell behind us did Claire speak, voice a rasp in the silence. "Do you still hear it?" I strained, ears full of the engine's growl, pulse thudding like drums against my ribs. And beneath it all, low, muffled, unrelenting. I swear I heard a baby crying. Not from the mountains we'd left behind. From the back seat we didn't dare turn around to see. Do you ever wonder whether our world is just one layer in a stack of thin-skinned realities, each turning at its own pace, showing us familiar faces with unfamiliar histories? Some nights, cracks appear between those layers, and on Halloween, the hinges creak widest. One listener swears she isn't from our Earth at all. She says a carnival ride spun her off the map, a carousel that only turns on Halloween night. And every October 31st, it drags her into a new dimension, a little further from the one she once called home. I'm passing her words along exactly as she wrote them. Whether you believe her is up to you. This is the Halloween Carousel. My name is Evelyn, and the year was 1945, at least in the place I was born. I am from a kind of alternate world to yours, similar, but not quite the same. A world without war, famine, or hate. It was home. Or maybe it still is. I don't know anymore. Our little town of Marigold set up a Halloween fair on the empty grounds beside Miller's Orchard. I was 10, giddy for kettle corn, clutching 2 nickel tickets in my mittens. At the edge of the midway stood a carousel no one remembered being set up. Its canopy was velvet, the color of midnight, edges trimmed in silver stars that shimmered though no wind touched them. No carnival music played, only a low humming, soft but steady, that tugged at the hairs on the back of my neck like invisible fingers. One painted horse stood out from the rest, a black stallion, its flared nostrils flecked with chipped gold, its eyes glossy as onyx marbles that seemed too alive, too alert. It watched me, I swear it did. I climbed onto the saddle. The ride started gently, the way carousels are meant to, wood creaking, mirrors catching glints of lamplight. Then it sped up, faster, too fast. Lights smeared into ribbons of fire. The orchards, the fairgrounds, even the night itself vanished. My hair whipped across my face, cold as a January storm, breath stolen from my lungs before I could scream. And then, with a violent lurch, the carousel stopped. The fair was gone. So were my parents. All around me rose a soot-gray city I had never seen, smokestacks belching ash, streets groaning under machinery, billboards painted in a language that looked almost English but tilted, broken, as though the letters had changed allegiance. My legs felt wrong when I dismounted, stretched taller, bones tighter under my skin. A cracked window on a nearby shop confirmed it. I wasn't a child anymore, 17, maybe 18. My clothes looked different, like the carousel knew what I needed to wear in my new body. I stayed beside the silent carousel, waiting for its motor to wind back to life, but it sat cold and still. The humming had stopped. When dawn came, I asked a passerby the date, October 31st, 1952. 7 years gone in the space of one spin. For 12 months I lived like a ghost, stealing bread, sewing in a factory where machines rattled like bones. I worked, I waited, I aged. And then on the next Halloween, without warning, the carousel's bulbs flared awake. No ticket taker, no line, just that soft humming again, calling. I ran to it, leapt onto the black stallion, dizzy with relief. The ride spun, faster, hotter, the air tasting of smoke and iron. When it finally lurched to a stop, I was standing in the middle of a boulevard drowned in firelight. Soldiers in gas masks patrolled the streets, rifles slung, their boots chewing glass with every step. Above them, a flag I didn't recognize burned from the skeleton of a collapsed tower. Somewhere in the haze, a voice barked through a loudspeaker. The plague camps are full. I looked down and realized I was wearing a long, canvas greatcoat, a cracked mask strapped over my face. My hands shook as I tore it off, desperate to breathe. The air stabbed my throat raw, sharp and acrid, every inhale like swallowing knives. That year I lived like a rat, stealing food, working for crumbs, ducking into alleys whenever the soldiers marched past. That was when I began to understand the cruelty. The carousel was no children's ride. It was a doorway, and it delighted in dragging me across worlds, always the wrong ones. never the one I prayed for. Each Halloween it returned. No matter where I was, an alley, a factory, a ditch, it appeared, bright and gleaming, humming its summons. And each time I climbed onto the black stallion, I changed. My bones sagged heavier, my skin drew tighter, my reflection shifted, sometimes older, sometimes younger, never the same twice. I wrote it all down in a journal that stinks of mildew and grief. Page after page of wrong cities, wrong years, wrong skies. Each entry a prayer for something familiar. A street I knew, the smell of our farm after a rainstorm, the sound of my mother's voice calling me home. Something to prove I still belonged to a world that was mine. Year after year, world after world, 1968, streets drowned in neon hieroglyphs, rain sizzling purple against the pavement. 3085, an endless winter, the sun swallowed, the sky locked in permanent night. 2069, airships the size of cathedrals drifting overhead, their black hulls broadcasting sermons in stuttering Morse. 2052, miles of satellite dishes tilting toward a moon that no longer answered. And now, October 31st, 2025, the carousel waits again. This time it squats in an overgrown parking lot behind a shuttered strip mall off Route 18. Jack-o'-lanterns grin from porches nearby. Teenagers in discount costumes dare each other to climb the rusty fence and take selfies, not knowing what they're standing beside. The black stallion's paint is peeling, its once golden saddle dulled to rust. But the eyes still glimmer like wet obsidian, watching. The platform is silent until midnight. Then the hum begins, a low, bone-deep lullaby only I seem to hear. Already I can feel the gears grinding awake beneath the boards, tugging me forward. I don't know where the next spin will take me. Maybe back to the place I began. Maybe someplace far worse. But the carousel doesn't ask what I want. It doesn't let me choose. It only rents me to each world for a single aching year before it calls me back again. So if you stumble on an old carnival tonight and see a carousel flicker to life where no ride should be, don't climb onto the black horse. Don't let curiosity trick you into believing it's just a ride. Because once the platform turns, once the stars blur and the world falls away, you may find yourself living a lifetime in a place that looks almost like yours, but never will be. And then, like me, you'll spend every Halloween praying the next spin finally takes you home. They call it Spirit Lake, but locals know it by another name, the Lake of No Return. Small, almost pretty, tucked high in the pines like a piece of dark glass dropped between ridges. But every autumn its surface turns to ink and writes the same story. People go up, and the mountain keeps them. Some say the ferryman was once a miner who drowned here, cursed to row the waters forever. Others whisper he was never a man at all, just a campfire story parents told to scare kids from the water. But stories don't leave footprints on the shore. This is the story of the ferryman of Spirit Lake. My badge reads Deputy Mark Teller, Clearwater County Sheriff's Office, but around here folks whisper another name, the Undertaker in uniform. 12 Halloweens I've patrolled this valley. 12 Halloweens I've written neat reports that end the same way. Missing, presumed drowned. Parents beg, I warn. Kids laugh. The lake always answers. This year it was 5 seniors from Valley Ridge High. They swore they'd live stream the whole night, prove the ghost stories were propaganda. They hit the trailhead at dusk, flashlights, junk food, a Bluetooth speaker thumping bass all the way up the switchbacks. I shadowed them from a ridge, radio silent, the weight of my badge heavy as an anchor. Couldn't legally drag them back. Trespass signs only scare people who plan to leave. At 21:17, the first camera froze. Their streamer, Kayla, was panning across the lake when the feed hissed and webbed with static. A split-second frame locked on her face, eyes wide, mouth shaping a question she never asked. Then nothing. The others laughed it off in chat, called it lag. In the distance, the water lapped quietly along the shore almost. 22. Marco's feed died next. His lens caught a silhouette in the tree line. Tall, crooked at the joints, lantern glow spilling from its chest instead of its hand. He stepped toward it, giggling. "Nice VFX, guys." His friends watched as the night swallowed him. Color first, then shape, then sound. His phone remained on the moss, live chat still spitting emojis. The shoreline pulsed once, blue as breath. By 22:45, the survivor count was 3. They found the cabin around 23:10, old logging shack on stilts half in, half out of the water. Legend says a ferryman lived there a century back, rowing miners across with pennies and souls. The kids pushed the door and the whole place exhaled lake mist. Camera 3 showed warped boards, a stove packed with bones too thin for deer, and walls plastered with rotted tickets stamped one way. Cat's mic picked up music, thin, warped, a waltz leaking from a gramophone with no moving needle. The lake rippled in time with the notes, though the air was dead still. A handprint bloomed on the cabin glass, water running down from the wrong side. Cat whispered, "Do you guys see that?" Someone answered, "See what?" She was gone before the question ended. Just a splash, then silence. By 23:37, 2 were left. I broke from the ridge and sprinted downhill, my radio screeching open channels, motion sensors along the shore flickering like Morse code. Branches clawed at my sleeves as I breached the tree line and stepped onto the bank. Ethan and Jules staggered just ahead, eyes glassy, teeth chattering though the air was warm. They turned at the sound of my boots crunching gravel. Relief flared on their faces until they saw mine. I kept walking, slow, steady, as though something deeper than duty was pulling my body toward the water. My badge felt like it was burning through my shirt, heavy as an anchor. They whispered my name, begged me to help, but their voices thinned against the fog. And then it started. My breath clouded though the night was still. Skin tightened like parchment over my cheekbones. A beard of dripping reeds slithered down my jaw. My hat brim sagged wide, black as drowned felt, heavy with lakeweed. Ethan stumbled backward as my eyes hollowed, the pupils bleeding away into lantern glow. Jules covered her mouth, but her scream was swallowed by the dark. I didn't raise my sidearm. I raised a single finger to my lips. Behind me, the lake obeyed, lanterns blooming on the surface, each flame steady though no wind touched them. Below the light, pale figures turned in slow circles, arms linked, their hair streaming upward as if the water had no floor. Ethan sobbed as his body leaned forward without his will. The water climbed his shins, his waist, his chest. Jules tried to drag him back. The moment her hand touched his sleeve, the current caught her too. Both of them staggered out into the black, drawn like moths to flame. I stood on the bank, half man, half shadow, watching their faces disappear beneath the ink. The lake closed without a ripple, but the circle of dancers grew by 2. Midnight, 0 survivors. I stood on the bank, not Mark Teller anymore, but something older. The reeds in my beard dripped, the lantern light pulsed in my chest, and the hunger of the lake coiled tight around my bones. I slipped quietly into the black water, the lantern rising from my hands to take its place in the circle. By dawn, the shoreline was empty. Wet boot prints and reeds trailed from the water straight to my cruiser. The official report will read the same as always: missing, presumed drowned. 37 before, 5 more now. No one asks why I'm the last to see them alive. No one questions why the lake never gives up its dead. But I know. I've always known. The lantern calls, the water obeys, and I am the one who delivers them. Badge or no badge, deputy or ferryman, it makes no difference. The lake chose me long ago. So if you come to Spirit Lake on Halloween night and see a lantern burning steady against the wind, don't step closer. Because the moment you do, I'll be there, waiting to take you under. They say a cemetery is only quiet because the dirt is thick enough to muffle the screams. Walk the rows at dusk and you'll feel it. The pressure of centuries pressing up from below, eager for one breath of air, one echo of life. Names fade from stone, flesh rots to dust. But music lingers like perfume clinging to a corpse. My name is John, and 12 years ago was my first Halloween without Mom. She died in late summer, slipping away so gently it felt less like a final exhale and more like a violin note bowing into silence. I was 35, married with children of my own, yet the house she left behind became a mausoleum. Sheet music curled yellow on the piano stand. Ball gowns drooped across wardrobe doors like hanged bodies. Jasmine haunted the hallways, sweet and suffocating. She wasn't just a teacher of music and dance. She was a conjurer. 3 steps and a waltz in 3/4 could spin time backward, pull childhood from the grave, and make me a boy again. And Halloween, that was her sacred night. Costumes at the door, wax pumpkins grinning in warm light, vinyl records hissing while the leaves outside scraped the glass like bony fingers. When she died, the world slipped out of key. I found myself clutching the violin she gave me in 6th grade, wood polished thin where her hands had tuned it, again and again. Grief demanded sound, so I wrote a piece in A minor, a lament stitched from her lullabies, the melody that taught my first box step. I called it the Halloween Waltz, and the only stage that seemed worthy was Oak Ridge Cemetery, plot 42B, beneath the maple that refuses to shed all its leaves, like even the tree is afraid to bear its dead. Halloween night bled cold and silver. At 11:56 p.m., the wrought iron gate groaned wide, the sound like a throat cleared after centuries of silence. Gravel crunched beneath my boots, applause from the unseen. The hush was so complete it felt carved, hollowed, a pause in the world's heartbeat. I set a lantern at Mom's headstone, rosined the bow, and raised the violin. The first note left the strings thin as candle smoke. Every shadow in the cemetery shifted toward me, bending, listening. By the 3rd measure, I felt warmth spread across my neck, too fierce, too sudden. Not earthly warmth, but the heat of a memory clawing its way back from the grave. I turned. She hovered above the grass, silver gown drifting like a ripple across dark water. Her face was Mom's, but her eyes, once soft maple brown, had darkened into panes of black glass. They reflected a moonlight that didn't exist. She did not speak. She only raised one hand, fingers trembling like a conductor's cue, and the bow kept moving. My hands weren't my own anymore. The melody twisted darker, souring into chords I hadn't written, notes that scraped like nails dragged across a coffin lid. Each measure seemed to open the ground wider. The lantern flickered. All around me, headstones groaned as if their occupants had shifted, rolling closer to the sound. When she danced, the ground responded. Soil convulsed, splitting like cracked lips. Fingers, bone, sinew, half-rotted velvet gloves clawed their way into the open air. One by one, the sleepers surfaced. A child in tattered Sunday dress, a Civil War soldier missing half his face, a bride still wearing rust-stained lace. They circled us, partners seeking a conductor. I played on, because stopping felt like a sin punishable by worse than death. Mom's footsteps never dented the grass, but every turn of her body drew new corpses from the earth, like a sinister metronome animating their decay. Hundreds twirled between the headstones, jawbones clicking to keep time, empty eye sockets fixed on me. The music thickened the air. Every bow stroke felt like pulling a blade across a throat. I wept, notes blurring with tears, but my arms kept moving. The final chord rang out. 3 beats, a cold pause, then silence so absolute it felt like falling into a void. All at once, the dancers froze. Mom leaned close enough for her chill to frost my breath. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged, only the vibration of a warning I felt in my bones. She backed toward her stone. The others followed, folding themselves into graves that sealed like scars. In a blink, the cemetery stood empty, lantern flame guttering in the windless dark. I fled before dawn's first crow, telling myself it was grief, shock, hallucination, anything but truth. Yet truth mailed itself to me. October 1st, a cream envelope with no stamp lay on my doormat. Inside, gilt script bled across heavy paper. It's been the same each Halloween since that first. This year the envelope came again. You are hereby appointed guest conductor for the 12th annual Halloween Waltz. Midnight, October 31st. Venue, Oak Ridge Cemetery. Podium provided. I don't need directions. Mom's headstone is the perfect height to command an orchestra of the dead. That invitation throbs on my mantle like a second heart. If I accept, the dancers will rise again, and this time, the music may insist I trade my bow for a coffin lid. So if you ever feel the itch to serenade the sleeping, remember this: graves are merely doors, and a single wrong melody can blow them all wide open. When the dead begin to waltz, they don't care who conducts, only that the music never stops. They say you should never live next door to a place the dead once called home, especially when that home was a funeral home. Call this clickbait if you want, but the house beside my little tin box of a trailer never stopped working, no matter how long the coffins were gone. And if you're foolish enough to doubt me, keep scrolling. If you're brave enough to listen, lean in. Believe it or don't, but I know exactly what happened, because I'm the one who locked eyes with what crawled out of that darkness. This is the thing in the house next door. I bought the single wide because it was cheap, isolated, and close to the mill where I pulled double shifts to keep the lights on. The only neighbor was a sagging Victorian that once doubled as Blackwood Funeral Home, closed since the early 90s, boards on the windows, weeds through the porch, ivy choking the life from its chimneys. Most nights I'd catch a thump or a muffled clatter drifting through my walls, the way an old house settles after sunset. I minded my business. Earplugs, a beer, bed. You learn to ignore ghosts when rent's due on Friday. 2 weeks before Halloween, my sister Lydia and her 14-year-old daughter Amber rolled up with more luggage than floor space. Lydia called it a break from city energy. I called it cramped. The very first night they heard the noises, soft knocking like bone on wood. Amber pressed her face to the trailer's fogged window and whispered, "Someone's in there, Uncle John. I saw a candle move." I told her exactly what I told myself. Leave it alone. Lydia nodded and crossed her fingers behind her back. She'd been dabbling in what she called spiritual work. Tarot, pendulums, cemetery dirt, and tiny jars. I didn't know that then. I just knew she kept humming under her breath at breakfast, sketching strange symbols in her journal, balancing energy, whatever that means. I chalked it up to midlife restlessness. The mill needed overtime. I grabbed it. 12 hours gone, $12 an hour. When I left that morning, I made Lydia swear, hand on the dash, to stay away from the house next door. She smiled too wide and promised. I pulled back into the gravel driveway close to midnight, engine rattling like death itself. No porch light on the trailer, no television glow. My stomach sank. I found them curled in my bedroom closet, Lydia white-knuckling a half-burned candle, Amber sobbing into a pile of jackets. Before I could speak, a voice raspy as frost on metal slid across the room. "Why did you disturb me?" A black shape pooled in the corner, more shadow than substance, taller than the ceiling, crooked where a spine should bend. My flashlight beam throbbed against it and died. Lydia whispered that they'd gone inside the funeral home before dusk, just to cleanse the energy. Dozens of candles chanting an invitation. Something answered. Something followed. I grabbed my keys. 10 minutes later, we were coughing motel air freshener perfume, TV volume max to drown the whispering that still chased Lydia's ears. Sunrise didn't help. When we tried to grab clothes from the trailer, the front door swung shut by itself, and all three of us felt something smiling behind it. Second night, different motel, same knocking on the walls, same voice behind Amber's eyes. Third night, we tried my buddy Chris on the edge of town. He met us in the driveway, arms crossed, Bible tucked under one elbow. "I can feel it standing behind you," he said without blinking. "I'm sorry, man, not under my roof." He loaned us a tent, a camp stove, and directions to Old Mill Lake, free camping, far from neighbors. The lake was glass still, moonlight nailed to its surface. I prayed water would muffle whatever clung to us. Sometime after 3 a.m., Amber's scream cracked the night wide open. I burst from my sleeping bag to see the tent glowing orange, candles we never lit ringing her like a cage. The black shape towered above her, taller than any man, thin hands pressing the nylon roof inward. I was happy where I was. You should have left me alone. The lake answered with ripples that slithered onto the shore. We fled barefoot, gravel carving our heels, headlights off to keep from seeing what might be in the rear view. By dawn, my sister was shaking, mumbling that the thing had latched to her aura and wouldn't let go. I believed her. Amber just stared, eyes dull like someone switched her off. That afternoon I weighed blood against bone. Lydia was my sister. Amber was family. But the black shape wasn't done, would never be done, until it wore us like puppets or dragged us back to that rotting parlor 1 floor above the embalming table. I pulled into a truck stop lot, engine idling, and told Lydia I couldn't run anymore. You invited it. You have to send it back. She begged for help. I told her help ended at the state line. I handed her the keys to my car, cash from my wallet, and the address of a church rumored to tackle anything darker than a grave at midnight. Then I stepped out and let the door slam behind me. The moment the tires peeled away, the air felt lighter, like the world exhaled. The black shape stayed with them, not me. Haven't heard from Lydia since. Sometimes I wonder if that's mercy or aftermath. So if you're scrolling real-life horror threads looking for thrills, remember this. Cheap rent next to a dead funeral home comes with a cost. Some houses never clock out, and some doors stay propped open, waiting for the curious with candles and a nose for trouble. Believe it or don't, but I still hear that voice whenever the wind hits the trailer wall just right. Why did you disturb me? And I know I made the right choice, because I never ever answer back. There are carnivals that drift in on October wind the way tumbleweeds cross the highway. Here for 3 nights, gone by sunrise on November 1st. Follow the lights and you'll find midway rides that groan like coffins, midway barkers who never blink, and, if you're truly unlucky, a garish green and orange facade painted with a crooked scarecrow jack-o'-lantern grinning down at you from a fun house. This is the Halloween Funhouse. My name's Toby Garrison, and if you're reading this, then I guess he let me write it. The one who's me now. I'm or was 16, high school nobody. My big brother Mark is everything I'm not. 6'2", varsity letter, magnet for trouble. Halloween night, he dragged me to the pop-up carnival that sprouted in the cornfield outside town. He and his idiot friends spent the evening yanking cotton candy cones from little kids, tipping over milk bottle games, and causing general chaos as normal. I tagged along, half mortified, half thrilled they'd finally let me hang. That's when he started following us. At first I thought the Pumpkin King was just another Halloween mascot. He looked unsettlingly real. A burlap coat stuffed with straw, rope belt, crooked farmer's hat. His head was an enormous pumpkin carved into a jagged, lopsided smile. Triangular eyes slanted so the candle glow inside danced like living embers. He never spoke, just cocked his head in brief, bird-like twitches as if measuring us. Every time we changed rides, he appeared at the exit. Every time Mark's crew shoved someone, that orange grin seemed to stretch wider. Close to midnight, the midway lights flickered, each one shutting down with a resounding thud. The people seemed to disappear into the shadows. Suddenly a sign buzzed to life over the funhouse. Pumpkin King's Mirror Maze. Free last ride. The Pumpkin King beckoned, arms creaking like dry corn stalks. Mark hooted, "Free? Why not?" and barged ahead. His friends followed, still laughing. I hesitated at the entrance. Up close, the facade looked like a sagging barn splashed in carnival paint. Above the doorway, the Pumpkin King's painted face loomed 15 feet tall, teeth chipped, a smear of dried something, paint, I hoped, under one eye. The door itself was shaped like a gaping mouth. boards painted white for teeth. Inside, the hall of mirrors breathed cold. Fluorescent bulbs sputtered overhead, and funhouse music wobbled slow, as if half melted. Mark's reflection shattered into dozens, then hundreds of crooked versions strutting ahead while mine lagged behind. The mirrors felt too close, glass fogging with every breath. That's when the screaming started. I spun. Mark's friends pounded on the silvered walls from the inside of the glass, faces stretched, mouths moving but soundless. One by one, their images fogged, smeared, and slid deeper until nothing but warped shadows remained. The passages around me twisted. Every turn dumped me back into more mirrors. Somewhere unseen, the Pumpkin King's limp straw boots scraped the floor, shuffling closer. I caught my reflection, and my stomach iced over. Triangular eyes burned where mine should be. My face had become a carved pumpkin, grin carved wide. Straw peeked from my sleeves where hands had been. I tried to shriek. The jagged mouth stayed frozen, locked in silent laughter. Ahead, an exit sign flickered. Through the final mirrored arch, I saw myself, the old flesh and blood Toby, strolling out into the midway in Mark's Letterman jacket. He turned back once. Same brown eyes, same nervous half smile I practiced in every school photo. Only now it wore pure relief. Find someone to take your place next year, he whispered, voice mine yet hollow, and you can have your life back. Then he vanished into the crowd. I stumbled after him, boots of straw scraping metal floor. But when I stepped through the arch, I was back where I started, alone in a dead tunnel, mirrors reflecting nothing except a lank scarecrow boy with a pumpkin for a head. The funhouse lights died. Outside, midway music cut to static. By dawn, the carnival was gone, leaving only trampled corn and the smell of smoke. That was a year ago. Halloween is tonight. The Pumpkin King's face stares at me now from every reflection. Shop windows, phone screens, muddy water. Midnight ticks closer and I feel the funhouse walls waiting somewhere just beyond the tree line. But at least if I can get someone to take my place, I can leave. My brother, his friends, well, they just ceased to exist. So if you see a straw-stuffed figure in a pumpkin mask waving you toward a mirror maze that wasn't there yesterday, keep walking. Because once you enter the Pumpkin King's funhouse, the only way out is to hand your face, your name, your whole life to the next kid who thinks a free ride sounds like harmless fun. And trust me, a year trapped behind glass is a long time to practice your grin. They say haunted houses don't just trap the dead. Sometimes they remember the living too. You pass by them every day, the ones with boarded windows, peeling paint, no cars in the drive. But on Halloween night, some of them wake up. And if you're foolish enough to go inside, they just might remember you. This is the story of the house on Greymark Hill. You can believe me or not, I don't care. But I know my story is true, and that is all that matters. They say the house only opens on Halloween night. I used to think that was just some dumb local legend. Every town has one. Ours just happened to be Greymark Hill, steep road, dead end, one crumbling Victorian at the top, hidden under a canopy of old oak trees like nature was trying to forget it existed. Windows boarded up, yard full of thorns, roof sagging like the house was tired of holding in its secrets. Nobody lived there. No one owned it either, not really. No taxes, no power, no mail. And yet, every October 31st, without fail, the front porch light flicked on at dusk. A warm yellow glow spilling through slats in the wood. A faded pumpkin would appear on the step. And the front door, always sealed shut the rest of the year, would be left slightly ajar. People would dare each other to go up there. Some kids claimed they knocked and ran. Others said they went inside, but no one ever had proof. No videos, no photos, just shaky stories and nervous laughter. I never believed any of it. Until 5 years ago. I was 17, too old for trick-or-treating, too young to drink with the college crowd. My friends were all at parties. I was bored, walking home from my cousin's place when I decided to take the long way past Greymark Hill. The sky was burnt orange, dusk settling in like a slow suffocation. The kind of night where the wind carries whispers and every shadow feels like it's watching. And there it was, porch light on, pumpkin out, door cracked open. I don't know what possessed me, but something pulled at me, like a string tied to the base of my spine. I climbed the hill slowly, crunching through dead leaves. The wind was louder up there, screaming through the trees like it was trying to warn me. My gut twisted, but I told myself I'd just peek inside. That's it. The door creaked louder than it should have, like it had been waiting to open again. Inside, everything smelled like damp wood and old perfume. The air felt thick, too still, like I had stepped underwater. The furniture was covered in white sheets, dust gathered in drifts. It was like the house had been frozen in time. But it wasn't empty. Somewhere upstairs, a music box was playing. Slow, off-key. Pop Goes the Weasel. I swear I could hear footsteps too, just barely. Soft, like someone walking barefoot across an attic floor. I turned to leave, but the door was gone. Not closed, gone. The doorway I'd walked through wasn't a door anymore. It was a slab of old plaster, smooth and seamless where the frame had been. The window beside it was bricked up as though the house had decided it no longer needed air. My mouth went dry. The floor shifted under my boots, and the air exhaled a smell of wet paper and roses left too long to rot. The house had changed. Hallways yawned into corridors that hadn't existed before, stretching longer with every step. The wallpaper pulsed faintly, as if something inside the walls was breathing. My flashlight beam shrank until it felt like a pinhole of light in a room built to swallow it. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice came back thin and warped, like someone playing it back through a broken speaker. Upstairs, something moved, a slow, deliberate shuffle that didn't sound like footsteps at all. Then it appeared on the stairs. Not a person, but the outline of one, heatless, colorless, a vertical ripple where a body should be. It stepped down slowly, measuring the distance like it had all night to reach me. Panic shoved me into motion. I barreled down a side hall and through one door after another, but each threshold dropped me back into the same sitting parlor. No windows, no exit. Only one thing stayed constant, a tall mirror against the far wall. No matter where I entered from, it was waiting, angled so it caught me no matter where I stood. Then I saw them. Not reflections. People, pressed behind the glass as if it were a window into a room that shouldn't exist. Children in torn frocks, men in frayed collars, women with hair like dirty cobwebs, faces the color of bone, mouths sewn shut with black thread, eyes wide open, unblinking, fixed on me. Their lips worked slowly, silently, as if they were trying to scream, but nothing could cross the glass. I stepped back. The mirror showed me among them now, small and sweating, my own face floating in their crowd. My throat locked. I tried to call out. What came out wasn't a voice, just a ragged gasp. Something answered anyway. It slipped from the shadow at the ceiling, long-limbed and jointed wrong, black as a burn, its body wrapped in strands of something like webbing. It didn't drop, it drifted, bending toward me, fingers opening and closing with deliberate patience, like it had been waiting for me all along. No eyes, no mouth, just a shape that understood exactly how to take me. I ran. I don't remember the path, only the taste of copper in my mouth, the sting of wood tearing my palms, the portraits on the walls turning to follow me with glassy eyes. 1 second I was in that parlor. The next I was on the pavement at the bottom of Greymark Hill, knees buckling, lungs dragging for air. My shirt clung to me with sweat. My arms were scored with fresh scratches that bled slow and dark. People said I'd blacked out. They said I'd dreamed it. They said anything to make it small enough to fit in a police report. But whatever followed me didn't care about reports. That night, when I stumbled into my bedroom and flicked on the light, the mirror was there above my dresser. A mirror that hadn't been there that morning. No matter how many times I get rid of it, it always comes back. Every Halloween, the faces inside come into focus, pressing closer to the glass, eyes locked on me. And one of them, pale, silent, stitched, carries the same scar on the chin I see in my own reflection. It doesn't blink. It's waiting for me to stop running. Some cemeteries are peaceful. Others remember who disturbed them. You think it's just stone and silence, rows of names fading in the weather. But not every grave stays quiet, and not every soul stays buried. Because on Halloween night, some of them rise just long enough to finish what was never done. This is the story of the Midnight Watch. I never meant to become a cemetery watchman. It just sort of happened. The town budget couldn't afford real security, so they paid me $50 a night to stroll the old Blackridge grounds with a flashlight and a thermos of stale coffee. Keep vandals out, they said. Make sure nobody steals the copper plaques. They forgot to warn me about everything else. Blackridge sits on a hill outside town, surrounded by twisted iron fencing no taller than my chest. Victorian angels lean at crooked angles. Limestone cherubs have wept away their faces under a century of rain. There's a caretaker's shack by the gate, but it hasn't been used in decades. Just rotted wood and a rust-hinged bell that never rings, even when the wind howls off the wheat fields. Halloween night was supposed to be easy money. Kids were busy trick-or-treating downtown, and the older crowd preferred the corn mazes and bonfires on the edge of the valley. I showed up at dusk, signed the clipboard, standard procedure, and started my rounds beneath a sky the color of dying embers. The air smelled like frost-bitten leaves and damp earth. You'd think it would be quiet, but Blackridge breathes. The stone settles, the grass whispers, and somewhere underground water drips in rhythms you can almost mistake for a heartbeat. I took the main path first, gravel crunching under my boots, flashlight beams skimming epitaphs so worn they looked like eroded teeth. 20 minutes in, I noticed something odd. Fresh flowers on an unmarked mound near the oldest section. White chrysanthemums, still dewy, their stems wrapped in black ribbon that glistened like oil. No one ever visits those graves. Most family lines died out before the Great Depression. I knelt to touch the petals. They were ice cold, as if plucked straight from winter. Behind me, the bell at the front gate chimed. Once. I froze. No wind, no footsteps. Just that hollow note echoing through the headstones. The gate was a quarter-mile away. Nobody could have reached it without crossing my path. I radioed dispatch. Nothing but static. The flashlight flickered. I smacked it and the beam steadied, but when I turned back to the mound, the flowers were gone. Only ribbon remained, coiled in the grass like a sleeping snake. I told myself it was a prank. Local kids, maybe, hiding in the shadows. Ignore it. Finish the shift. I cut across the rows to the newer graves. Polished granite, little battery-powered candles blinking beside plastic pumpkins. That's when I heard breathing. Not mine. This was slower, wet, like lungs full of mud. It came from behind a marble obelisk 5 feet away. I stepped closer. The air grew colder with every inch, frosting the edge of my breath. My light swept around the monument. No one there. But on the obelisk's face, a smear of fresh dirt was sliding upward, as if gravity had taken the night off. The dirt collected at eye level, forming the words, "My turn." The words pulsed, then crumbled, falling to the base like normal soil again. I stumbled back, heartbeat hammering so hard it shook the thermos clipped to my belt. The bell rang a second time. This time the note was sharper, almost metallic, and it rolled across the hill like thunder that had forgotten the sky. I ran toward the gate. The main avenue seemed longer than before, headstones crowding closer, narrowing the path so I had to shoulder past angels with missing wings. Every light on my belt died at once. Flashlight, phone, even the tiny LED on my radio. All I had left was moonlight, and the moon was slipping behind clouds. Blackridge changed while I ran. The air thickened until every step felt like pushing through wet concrete. Graves shifted. Some sank, others swelled as if something underneath was breathing out. I tripped over a raised root, except it wasn't a root. It was a finger-thin bone, slick and yellow in the dark. More bones surfaced around it, arranging themselves into shapes that writhed back into the earth before I could scream. I never reached the gate. Instead, the path ended at an open mausoleum I swear hadn't existed on my map. Its iron doors yawned inward, and a faint orange glow flickered inside, like candlelight seen through pond water. The bell rang a third time, deeper now, and the glow brightened, illuminating names carved above the threshold. Eleanor Hart, 1871 to 1890. Samuel Hart, 1888. The second line was unfinished. My last name is Hart. I don't have relatives buried here. Our branch moved north generations ago. But seeing my surname cut into stone snapped something in my chest. I tried to run, yet my legs carried me forward, as if invisible hands guided my shoulders. The air in the mausoleum was warm, sweet with the scent of chrysanthemums. At the center stood a stone slab, and on it lay the flowers I'd found earlier, still fresh, ribbon shining. Beside them rested a half-burned candle and an antique bell, identical to the one at the gate. I reached for the bell, but the slab lurched, tilting upward like a yawning coffin lid. Darkness gaped below, black soil, root-tangled, wet. Something moved in that pit. A pale arm stretched out, fingers sewn together with black ribbon. Another arm followed. Then a face surfaced, eyes hollow, mouth full of damp earth. It wasn't a corpse. It was me. The likeness was perfect. Same scar on the chin, same cracked lip. It opened its mouth, and a voice like shovels scraping stone whispered, "Your shift is over." I stumbled back. The ground behind me had melted away. The mausoleum stood alone in an abyss of swirling fog. Echoes of countless bells rang from below, tinny cascades clanging in impossible harmony. The double of me sat up slowly, dirt crumbling from its chest. Its mouth opened, my mouth, and it whispered in a voice that didn't belong in this world, "Your shift is over." But something in me snapped as it grinned and lunged for the bell. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was panic. I grabbed the bell before the thing in the coffin could reach it, and without thinking, I rang it. Once, hard. The sound didn't echo. It shattered. The candle flame blew out instantly, and the mausoleum shook like something massive had just slammed into it from the outside. Cracks split the stone floor. The air pulled backward, sucking in wind, leaves, even sound. That thing wearing my face screamed, mouth wide, no breath, no lungs, and began to crumble. The flowers and ribbon flamed and quickly turned to ash. I ran. The walls folded in on themselves as I passed. The mausoleum door didn't just open, it vanished. I stumbled out onto the gravel path, coughing, heart racing, and behind me, the mausoleum was gone. No stone, no light, just empty grass beneath a black sky. I didn't stop running until I reached the gate. And when I turned around one last time, I saw the bell, just the bell, lying in the dirt where the path began. I never took another shift. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear the bell. Not from a dream, from somewhere else, somewhere underground. And every Halloween night at exactly midnight, that damn bell rings 3 times, whether someone's watching the cemetery or not. The town council hired a new watchman, but he quit after tonight's bell tolled once, twice, 3 times, even though no wind stirred. If you pass Blackridge after sunset and hear a bell, keep walking. Some graves remember who disturbed them, and the one wearing my face still needs a partner for the midnight watch. You think you know the story. A girl in red, a house of candy, a well behind a cottage. But what if the tales you grew up with were never meant to comfort you? What if they were warnings wrapped in lace and lullabies to hide something much darker underneath? Welcome to Whispers After Dark, dark and twisted fairy tales, where happily ever after is never the point. And once the tale begins, it may already be too late to turn the page. We begin with Hansel and Gretel, the black-eyed twins of Candy Cottage. The village of Elderbrook sat on the edge of the Northwood, a tangle of hawthorn hedges and moss-slick lanes so narrow even moonlight had to squeeze through. On its northernmost lane stood Candy Cottage, lime-washed walls veined with peppermint pink, sugar glass windows that caught the sun like spun diamonds, and a chimney that forever breathed out the vanilla scent of slow-baked biscuits. Its mistress, Widow Beatrix Thorne, had baked for the harvest fair since the war. Her crumbly apple cakes were said to mend heartbreak. Her cookies turned tears to smiles. Children loved her, dogs adored her, and even the crows left shiny things on her windowsill in thanks for crusts. One evening in late October, when frost turned the holly berries to rubies, two children appeared at the village gate. They wore matching gray coats too thin for the cold and wool caps pulled low. Their faces were pale as candle wax, handsome almost, but the eyes beneath those caps were not the eyes of children. They were perfect wells of polished obsidian, lightless, depthless, reflecting little but your own startled face. They spoke little, only asking where they might find shelter, voices as soft as dust sliding off a coffin lid. Elderbrook's folk were wary. Fires were banked, doors bolted. Yet the scent of caramel drifted from Candy Cottage, and Beatrix, tending her cooling trays, saw the twins shivering beyond her gate. With a grandmother's sigh, she opened the latch and ushered them inside, pressing warm gingerbread squares into their small, cold hands. They thanked her in unison, polite, distant, too practiced. A draft curled through the kitchen, though no window was open, and every flame in the room fluttered low as if bowing. They ate without crumbs, every bite precise. Shards of hard sugar vanished behind those dark, bottomless eyes. Beatrix poured cocoa. They drank silently until the cups rang empty. "You poor dears," she murmured, smoothing Gretel's hair, though her fingertips tingled as if brushing nettles. "Stay the night, and tomorrow we'll find your people." Hansel smiled, but the expression never reached those void black irises. Beatrix tucked them into the guest room beneath quilts stitched with peppermint stripes. She set a honey wax candle on the dresser, kissed their foreheads, and wished them sweet dreams. Yet when she turned at the door, the candle guttered, and twin voices whispered together, "Sweet dreams, and sweeter waking." Downstairs she banked the stove, yet the vanilla scent soured into something metallic. The cat, old Seraph, hissed at the stairwell and bolted outside. Floorboards creaked in a rhythm too slow for footsteps, too quick for settling wood. Then came the tink, a delicate breaking, like a fingertip tapping sugar glass. Beatrix climbed the stairs with a baker's rolling pin clutched like a club. The guest room door hung ajar, quilts folded untouched. On the sill, a neat pyramid of teeth gleamed, each too sharp, too small. Outside, the orchard rustled, although the wind was still. She found them in the kitchen, chairs pulled close to the cold ovens, sliding their fingers across its iron door. "We like it here," Gretel said, voice flat. "It's warm. It smells like children." Hansel added, "We were hungry, but we found something better than sweets." They turned. Their mouths were ringed with pale crumbs. No, not crumbs. Frost. The air burned icy in Beatrix's lungs. She backed away, heart ricocheting against her ribs. "My dears, it's late," she managed, throat sand-dry. "You must rest." Hansel tilted his head. "We rested once, but the woodcutter's axe found us." Gretel's black eyes glittered. "We rested again, but the flames cracked our bones." Their smiles widened, stretching lips too far. "Now we'll rest here, and so will you." A shape loomed in the window. Seraph the cat, fur bristling, yowling like a dirge. The twins hissed, the sound of steam hitting iron. Beatrix seized a jar of holy salt, kept for stubborn pie crusts and older superstitions, and flung a shining arc between her and the children. Where grain struck the twins' coats, smoke spiraled. They shrank back, voices nodding into a single drone. "Hungry, let us in. We smell the sugar in your blood." Beatrix fled to the larder, slamming the oak door. Hands, too many, too small, scrabbled at the hinges. She remembered her grandfather's stories, roads of breadcrumbs leading to death, ovens meant for monsters or perhaps for witches. But stories were wrong. The monsters were children, children that never slept, never aged, only fed. Her trembling fingers worked dough and water, salt and cloves, shaping a crude mannequin. She whispered an old nursery prayer, the one that seals ovens and graves. Flour to bone, salt to earth, sweet to ash, keep what's cursed. Then she shoved the dough doll into the bread oven and bolted the iron latch. Fire roared, hotter than she'd stood. From the kitchen came a twin shriek that rattled the roof tiles. Silence fell. The latch cooled from red to black. When Beatrix dared open the larder door, the house smelled normal again. Sugar, spice, woods smoke. Yet on the floor lay 2 gray coats, empty. Atop them, a small pile of soot-black breadcrumbs leading to the threshold and dissolving in the moonlight. Village folk found Beatrix at dawn, sweeping ash from her hearth. She spoke little of what happened, but she kept the oven door bolted thrice, and no child, black-eyed or otherwise, ever crossed her gate again. Still, when dusk paints Elderbrook violet, travelers sometimes spot 2 pale figures at the hedgerow, their obsidian eyes shining like beetles in a jar. They never knock. They only watch Candy Cottage, waiting for a latch to lift or a candle to gutter. And if you listen, you'll hear the tap-tap of fingernails on sugar glass, counting crumbs the wind has yet to carry away. Fairy tales, myths, and legends, they twist through time like tangled roots beneath our feet. We tell them to children as if they're harmless. But stories like these didn't come from nowhere. They were born from shadow, shaped by fear, and carved out of something someone once saw. Because behind every fairy tale is a truth too dark to tell plainly. Our next dark tale warns of what happens when the bad seek to deceive. This is the dark tale of Grandmother Holly, the girl in the well. In the frost-bitten hamlet of Widdershins, an ancient stone well crouched at the edge of a thorn-strangled orchard. No bucket hung there, no rope, only darkness breathing cold air up the mossy rim. Villagers whispered it belonged to Grandmother Holly, the winter hag who shook feather quilts until snow smothered crops and hoofprints alike. Mothers warned children, drop nothing down that mouth unless you wish to feed it your name. Yet on the eve of the longest night, a girl named Elsbeth stood alone at the well. Her stepmother's spindle had rolled from trembling fingers and toppled over the lip, vanishing with a tiny plink that sounded too much like a laugh. If she returned without it, the lash would sing. So she climbed over the slick stones and let herself slide into the chill, down, until her scream folded under the weight of earth. She landed on loam that glowed faint blue, as though moonlight had curdled underground. A field of bare apple trees stretched crooked arms overhead, each fruit hanging frozen and blackened. Ahead, a cottage squatted beneath a roof of frost-stiff thatch, its gables iced with sugar rind, its door crooked like a smirk. An iron sign creaked above the lintel, letters spider-webbed with rust. Candy Cottage, guests welcome, debts paid. Elsbeth's breath smoked before her. She pushed the door. Inside, a hearth purred with blue-white fire. The air smelled of cloves, and something older, like snow melting on bones. At a long table sat Grandmother Holly herself, hair flat as mortar snow, eyes clouded as river ice, lips thin and colorless. She beckoned Elsbeth with a crooked finger, voice soft enough to peel skin from courage. Child, the spindle you seek pricked my realm. Nothing enters without owing. Work, and perhaps you may climb out again, whole. 3 tasks she set. 1, stir the cauldron where storm clouds boiled till they screamed white flakes. 2, strip the orchard's black apples and seed them with stars so dawn might rise. 3, carry a pillow taller than herself up the crooked attic stair, then shake it until the first crow of morning. Elsbeth labored, arms quivering, skin blistered by iron frost. The cauldron hissed like a throat clearing to sing. Snow began to fall in her own world overhead. She plucked apples that bled midnight sap, pressed shards of starlight into their wounds, and watched them glow with captive dawn. Last, she climbed the attic, quill feathers whispering under ticking. When she shook, blizzards roared out between rafters, howling across both worlds at once. Grandmother Holly's eyes glimmered. Diligent little sparrow, she crooned. You've earned your release. She led Elspeth to a wooden trapdoor in the floor. Step through. Hold your breath. Snowflakes rose around her, spinning upward like ash from a fire. Elspeth dropped and burst from the village well, gasping, hair crusted with frost. She stumbled into the orchard where sunlight pierced the gray dawn, and from the clouds above, coins began to fall, real ones. Shiny gold coins that clattered against stone and soil. Dozens. Hundreds. The orchard rang with their landing. Villagers rushed to her, voices lifted in awe and hunger. Her stepmother, sharp-eyed, breathless, pushed her way to the front, scooping up coins with shaking hands. What did you do? She hissed. Where did it come from? Elspeth only said, I worked, Maggie. That night, the stepmother fed greed into her own daughter like wine, telling her the well would make her rich, richer than Elspeth, richer than the widow, richer than the miller's son she'd been sweet on since summer. So Hilda went. She brought no spindle, just a cracked wooden spoon she flung into the dark, then followed it down with a laugh. At the bottom, the frost field was still. The trees trembled. The cottage door stood open. Grandmother Holly offered the same 3 tasks, her white eyes glittering with the weight of old judgment. But Hilda stirred the cauldron only once, then let it boil over. She gorged on the orchard, ripping fruit from the branches, juice slick on her chin, the seeds rattling from her teeth as she spat them into the frost. She dragged the pillow to the attic and dropped it against a crooked chair before curling up to sleep. Finished, she told the crone, smug. Grandmother Hall did not answer. She only raised one crooked hand and pointed, not to the trapdoor, not to the stair, but to the cellar. An iron hatch sat there, black and rust-bolted. She pulled it open, the hinges screaming. Hilda sneered, full of defiance, but when she leaned close, peering into the black, the old woman gave a gentle push. Hilda toppled into the void, her scream snuffed out as the hatch slammed shut. Grandmother Holly slid the bolt home. A breath of black mist slipped through the cracks and then hovered near Grandma Holly for only a moment as she pointed trapdoor that led to the well. What crawled out of the well a few moments later wasn't Hilda. Not anymore. It wore her clothes, her boots, her outline, but her skin gleamed tar-black, dripping and smoking where sunlight touched. Her hair ran in oily ropes. Her eyes were pits packed with ash and coal, staring without blinking. Wherever she stepped, the ground withered, grass turning black, frost melting into puddles that froze wrong. Her mouth was stitched shut, not with thread, with spider legs that twitched as if alive. Her mother stood paralyzed as the thing raised one hand, trembling in a soundless scream, then seized her by the arm. The woman fainted, limp, as the creature dragged her toward the orchard path. It looked once toward Elspeth, long enough for the girl to see nothing human left inside, then turned away. Slowly, relentlessly, it hauled its mother back to the well. They vanished together, swallowed whole. By morning, the well was gone. But when the wind howls through the valley, they say you can still hear water boiling, still hear the rasp of snow feather pillows being shaken deep underground. And sometimes on the orchard frost where silver coins once fell, black footprints appear overnight. They don't lead away. They don't wander. They only march in a straight line, right back to where the well once stood. So mind your step when the first snows fall. Because Grandmother Holly still watches through the cracks in her oven door, and she knows who works, who lies, and those whose mouths must be stitched shut. Legends cling to us for a reason. Fairy tales, myths, and warnings. They twist through time like roots beneath our feet. We dress them up for children, but the truth was never gentle. Red hoods, dark woods, and wolves with human eyes weren't born from imagination. Because some stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with blood on the snow and something hungry waiting in the trees. This is the dark tale of Red Riding Hood and the wolf within. Moon-silver fog clung to the firs of Germany's Schwarzwald, the Black Forest, when Anneliese, called Red for the scarlet cloak her mother stitched for her, left the village of Dornholtz. In her basket, dark rye, smoked venison, and a flask of wine for grandmother Ilse, who lived 3 leagues deep beyond the charcoal kilns. Folk said the pines there whispered when the wind was right, and in a tongue older than bone when it wasn't. Halfway along the hunter's path, Red met a wolf, taller than her shoulder, black as a cellar's last corner. Its eyes gleamed yellow, but its grin held something almost human, as though it found a private joke in her steady heartbeat. She froze, it leapt, teeth split cloak, skin, muscle. The forest rang with one scream and then only ravens. Yet when the fog lifted, she sat alone beneath the pines, tooth marks burning on her arm. The wolf was gone, leaving paw prints that ended in bare footprints pressed into the damp earth, as though it had shrugged off its pelt and walked away whistling. Shaken, she bound the wound and hurried on. Grandmother Ilse fussed over her bandage, brewed some tea and stoked the hearth, but nothing banished the ache that gnawed deeper each hour. Night fell. Clouds hid the half-grown moon. Red dreamed of running, four-legged, swift, joyful, while the trees bent aside like courtiers for a queen. 3 nights later, the full moon climbed above the pines, a white coin hammered thin. Red's fever broke with a snap of bone. Fingers lengthened into claws, jaw split to birth a muzzle, and her scream slid into a howl that rattled every shutter in Dornholtz. The wolf stepped from her skin like a snake slithering free of its burial shroud, a sleek she-beast wearing tatters of red wool. She hunted the lanes first, goats, geese, a smith caught at his forge. Blood painted the cobbles, bells tolled until throats shredded from terror. By dawn, she had vanished into the timber, her pursuers leaving hoof prints beside paw prints, as if prey and predator shared the same dark dance. Grandmother Ilse prayed behind bolted doors, but prayers blow thin in the black forest. The next full moon drew Red back, hunger sharpening her ribs. She stalked the cottage, growling and calling out to her grandmother to open the door and let her in. Her pleads became so desperate that the old woman opened the door. But the red glowing eyes staring back at her was not her granddaughter's, but a thing of fear and legend. A werewolf, coat gleaming in the moonlight as a low growl rumbled in its throat. Suddenly an arrow hissed past the wolf's ear, silver-tipped. It cracked against bark, searing smoke. From the shadows stepped Falk, the village woodsman, though no mere logger. Chainmail lined with wolfsbane stems clung to his shoulders, and at his belt hung blades hammered silver bright as moonlight. He had hunted shape-stealers from Bavaria to Bohemia and knew the stench of cursed blood. Red's snarl bent into a laugh, thin and hollow. Falk circled her, axe lifted, voice low as a storm drum. "Come back, child. Fight it." But the beast inside her only stretched wider, delighted by its new skin. She feinted once, then vanished between the trees, quicker than breath, leaving only snow unsettled in her wake. At dawn, Falk found clawed tracks veering into barefoot prints, racing north through the Hohental Gorge. Grandmother Ilse still clutched her lantern, hands shaking, while Dornholtz lay broken behind them. Doors caved in, pews split, the bell tower scorched black where the wolf had howled at the sky. Now each month, the hunter threads silver wire along the forest paths, waiting for the sound of padded steps that once belonged to a girl in a red hood. Some say she lingers on the ridges, moon flashing off her claws. Others swear they've heard her hum, a lullaby remembered wrong, just before the killing starts. The Schwarzwald is wide, old, hungry. And though Falk sharpens his silver and the villagers pray for dawn, Red walks it still, the wolf in her patient as winter and twice as cruel. We've all grown up with legends, fairy tales, and lullabies. But in our next story, Dance with the Dead, the 12 Dancing Princesses, The ballroom reeks of decay, slippers shred by dawn, and the waltz is played by no living hands. Because in this tale, the partners are corpses, and the dance never ends. In the old kingdom of Belstadt, far beyond the salt marshes and whispering pine, there lived 12 princesses, each more beautiful than the last, and each bound by a curse their father refused to see. Every morning, their silk slippers were torn through at the toes. Every night, their doors were locked from the outside, guarded by men who never heard a sound. Yet every dawn brought bruises beneath their eyes, silver dust on their gowns, and the scent of damp soil clinging to their hair. Desperate, the king proclaimed that whoever uncovered the secret of where his daughters vanished each night would be rewarded with marriage to a princess of his choosing. But failure meant death. Knights, scholars, and even princes tried. None returned. But Corin, captain of the palace guard, stepped forward for no reward of gold or throne. He had loved the eldest daughter, Princess Adelheid, since the summer they chased fireflies in the orchard when they were children. He would follow her into any darkness, even one that tasted of graves. He'd heard the rumors, that the palace was built atop a ruined crypt, that the queen had died in childbirth and something had been taken from the tomb that night. He watched the daughters, how they laughed too loud at dusk and walked too slow in daylight. How none would speak of dreams, though fear lined their eyes when dusk fell. Corin had been warned by an old woman in the market about the dance of the dead deep below the palace, so he hid in the girls' rooms and waited till they fell asleep. At midnight, he heard it, a low hum, like a violin bow against bone. The eldest sister, Adelheid, rose first. She whispered something in a language that cracked the air. One by one, the others followed, stepping barefoot across the stone floor in perfect silence. Adelheid tapped the bedpost 3 times, and the floor opened. Not a trapdoor, a hole. An ancient wound in the earth's skin. Cold air spilled upward. One by one, the sisters descended a spiral stair made of skeleton bones into darkness lit with bluish light. Corin followed, cloaked in shadows, holding a sprig of wolfsbane in his teeth, just as the old woman had instructed. They emerged beneath the palace foundations into a forest of petrified trees, bleached to ghostly ivory. Each trunk was studded with candle stubs burning with cold, corpse-blue flames. The ground was soft and uneven. When Corin knelt, he saw it wasn't moss at all, but grave soil, threaded with finger bones that clacked as the sisters passed. Waiting at the forest edge stood 12 black carriages, each pulled by skeletal chargers, whose manes were strings of shadow. The princesses stepped inside. Corin clung to the axle of the last coach, the iron charm biting his palm. Hooves struck sparks that smelled of rusted coffins until they arrived at a palace beneath the earth, tall, twisted, built from the bones of long-dead kings. Candlelight flickered in chandeliers made of vertebrae and teeth. A great ballroom stretched beyond, filled with suitors, each in finery from centuries past, skin gray and sunken, eyes glowing like old coals. 1,000 candles floated in midair, their flames languid and pale. Music rose, violins pitched just below human hearing, cellos groaning like doors in crypts. Dancers filled the ballroom, kings whose crowns had fused to their cracked skulls, brides in rotted satin, ribs laced with cobweb, and courtiers whose eyes glowed ember-red in worm-eaten sockets. Some were nearly skeletons, others half mummified. Scraps of velvet clung to desiccated limbs. Gold rings circled finger bones. Tongues of grave mold flickered where hearts had once beat. When the first note struck, the princesses curtsied and the dead bowed low. Hands, cold as river stones, took theirs, and the dance began. They waltzed across black marble veined with crackling lightning, skirts spinning petals of dust, spinning and twirling with corpses in rotted velvet, their hands stained with grave dust. Laughter echoed hollowly. Strings sang from unseen players. Blood dripped onto the marble with each step, but the princesses never faltered. Corin watched in horror. He picked up a goblet left on a banquet table, silver, crusted red inside, his proof for the king. The clock struck 6. The sisters, exhausted, collapsed into the arms of their partners. The music faded, and the dead began to whisper. Corin turned to flee, but one of the suitors was already watching him. Its face was hollow beneath its mask. Its mouth didn't move, but its voice slid into Corin's ears like smoke. You weren't invited. He ran, through the black forest and past reaching arms and grinding bone. The spiral bone staircase twisted beneath his feet. He burst through the floor just as the sun crested the horizon. The sisters returned to their beds, breathless and pale. The trapdoor sealed behind them. Their slippers lay in pieces by the fire. That morning, Corin stood before the king and told all, showed the goblet. The sisters wept, not in shame, but in fear. "You don't understand," Adelheid whispered. "We didn't choose to dance. If we don't, the dead come and take us." The king, furious and afraid, ordered the passage sealed, and the ballroom beneath the castle burned, stone, ash, and bone alike. But that night, one sister vanished, then another, then a third. Only Adelheid remained. At the king's command, Corin wed her and took her far from Velstadt's cursed walls. For a time, peace returned. A year later, their first child was born, a daughter with her mother's eyes and her father's quiet soul. But on the night of the first frost, Adelheid vanished. She slipped from their bed without a sound and was seen last beside the courtyard well, cradling the child in her arms and clutching a pair of worn, tattered slippers. She sang a lullaby too old for any cradle, soft, broken, and full of sorrow. By dawn, Corin woke to an empty bed and cold sheets. He searched the palace until his voice cracked, but all he found was their sleeping child wrapped in Adelheid's cloak, and a trail of barefoot prints leading to the oldest gate of the graveyard, where the path ended and the tracks simply stopped. Now, on nights when the fire burns low and the nursery grows still, Corin swears he can hear music, distant, slow, and drifting up through the floorboards. As if somewhere far below, the waltz is starting again, and in the cradle's shadow, the baby sometimes smiles and taps her foot to a rhythm only she can hear. This concludes our Ultimate Halloween Scary Story Collection 2. 20 dark tales of haunted folklore, cursed houses, restless spirits, and legends too heavy to stay in the grave. Thank you for joining us tonight and walking with us through the shadows. But remember, when the storm dies down and the fire fades, the echoes don't vanish. They wait, and sometimes they whisper your name. If you enjoyed tonight's journey with Whispers After Dark, make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another night of terror. Check out our other playlists for more haunted story collections, eerie campfire tales, and Gothic audiobooks to keep the chill close long after October has passed. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and beware of the whispers after dark.